Kim Bailey and this is Floral Art Review, and I'm doing my best to give you my strong voice today because I know there's someone watching at some point during showing these videos who's very critical of whether my voice has recovered or not. So for you, Tony, this is strong voice today. Today we're looking at a Stabile design. Now, Stabile is one of the three defined design styles in the Alexander Calder range. So they're classified as modern designs, so from the 60s and 70s. Stabile, by its very nature, is a static design that looks as though it has movement, as opposed to a Stamobile, which can have a static element and a mobile element in it as well. And then a mobile, which is obviously the hanging, moving kind of design. So for the Stabile design, I like all of these designs, I have to say, because they're sculptural in nature. And my affinity with natural product, plant material, is for the sculptural side of things, which is why I lean towards using Australian natives in my designs more so than any other type of plant material. So here we had a Stabile design. This is from 2022, so about 3 years ago. It was placed second in this competition. We had a 60 centimetre width to use. You can see the markers in the image that I've taken. And this, the background is a little bit distracting because it's the most wonderful venue that this particular competition was at. It's called the Abbey. It's a function centre, but obviously was originally designed for a different kind of purpose. Has the exquisite carved and ornate timber inside, as you can see in the background of the photo. Although the design was judged from the front, the judge did get the opportunity to walk around, and so I made sure, knowing that it was at this venue, I made sure that my design was finished off at the back as well. What I've tried to do with this design, my idea, was to have it look like it was somebody dancing, so a dancing form. So basically I've got the slice of timber as the base. Onto that I've put the triangular wire forms that you can get that I think are mostly used for growing tomatoes, but it's a good stable platform. I have wrapped some swordgrass around that or speargrass to mimic the shape of the skirt, but also to give it some flow. I haven't attached the bottom of the grasses so that there was an opportunity for them to flow out a little bit. I've got some flax and lamandra leaves that are wound around to indicate the spinning of the dancing. Some dried strelitzia leaves, which have their own, as you know, their own way of curling themselves up whenever they're drying. And the top part of the design is a banksia, and that was the head and shoulders of the dancer. So as I said, this design placed second in the competition, and I'm quite interested to see what Design AI has got to say, because the instruction that I gave it when I showed it the image was just that this was a defined design style. Didn't say what the definition was, so it'll be interesting to see in its research and its learning that it has now what it considers a Stabile design. So let's have a look at its analysis. Overall, first of all, this design fits well within the Stabile style, which is characterised by a stationary sculptural construction with strong form and balanced mass. So that's exactly what definition should be. And if you are faced with a Stabile design nominated in a competition, you should check to see what the definition is that you're going to be judged against, because it varies slightly country to country. So it's always good to check what the definition is for these very defined design styles. The work successfully demonstrates a sense of permanence and structural clarity. It appears grounded and sculpturally expressive without any visible movement, which is a key criterion for the Stabile defined design style. So, as I said earlier, as opposed to the Stamobile where you can have something that is moving, Stabile just has to imply that there's movement without anything actually moving. It's a great way to use sculptural pieces of material. Looking now at the principles and elements of design, line first of all. Dominant vertical lines are established through the upright grasses or reeds, creating height and strength. The curvilinear lines formed by the curl-dried plant material add expressive contrast and rhythm. So exactly as I said in the definition, I wanted the bottom part of it to be like a skirt and the top part to be the movement that was happening around the dancer. The interplay between linear and curving elements generates both energy and interest without compromising the static nature of the design. So whilst, and once again, it's reinforcing that it's a Stabile design because they're static, but they imply this movement. A form now. The form is clearly sculptural, with components unified into a single structural entity. It has dimensional presence, especially through the interlocked rings, which help define the negative spaces while enhancing the spatial dynamics. So this is where I've used the Lamandra, the green loops, to interlock and bring you back to out of the design, back into the design, and keeping with the flow of movement. So if you look at the line that is created by the Lamandra leaves and then through to if we're looking at the top of the design, I'm pointing as though I'm pointing it out on the screen. Follow the line of the curve at the top of the design, curved line through the strelitzia, and that brings you back down to the bottom strelitzia, around to the Lamandra again, and round to the very bottom strelitzia. So there's all of that movement that happens in that segment there, but behind it there is this very strong vertical line that keeps you unified in the design. Texture. The use of smooth green reed-like materials, which is the Lamandra and the flax, contrasts with the rough, dry, curled organic material, providing tactile variety. The natural wood base and botanical materials all enhance the earthy, raw textural palette. So there is some textural contrast there, probably not as much as I would have in some of my designs. You know that if you've seen any of the other videos, you know that texture is one of the things that I like to focus on, and there's probably not as much contrast in this as I would have in a normal design. Still, there's not a lot of genuinely rough surfaces. There's a roughness to the edge of the strelitzia leaves and a roughness visually to the banksia flower at the top, but the rest of it is quite smooth. So that's probably something that I'd look at a little bit more next time around. Space. There is excellent use of positive and negative space. Design breathes well as air moves through the coils and gaps. The circular form helps frame sections of open space, making the design visually dynamic, even with its Stabile category. So as I talked about before, that movement through the green and the dried leaves at the top of the design incorporates the space that it frames, as it says. So it's bringing all of that space into the design, because if you took away even one of those designs, it would become very narrow, very upright, and less dynamic, and less movement implied in it. So taking out the top of the green ones, perhaps, or even the bottom one, would not improve the design in any way. Colour. The monochromatic green palette dominates, punctuated by light brown tans of the dried circular elements and natural base. The muted tones harmonise well, staying true to a naturalistic expression, although the limited use of colour may reduce visual impact from a distance. That's true. If it was a feature piece, then I probably would have considered something more visually dominant in terms of the banksia. But because I wanted really to focus on the movement, not so much anything else, I kept it within that very natural palette, I guess is the way the green palette is the way I would put it. Balance. The design is visually balanced with asymmetrical weight distribution, carefully managed through the strong verticals and evenly spaced circular elements. The wood slice base provides a solid foundation both physically and visually. So it's good that it's balanced. To my mind, I have some concerns about the top loop of the Lamandra, the green leaf. I just think it's a little bit too big in terms of the rest of the design. I needed to bring it in a little bit more. There is another loop that is facing the camera that you can't see quite as well. That's okay, but it's not repeated anywhere else. So I probably would bring those two, now that I look at it even more, those two loops of Lomandra, I would probably bring in a little bit so that they weren't so much bigger than the obviously visually dominant loops of the Strelitzia leaves that are on the other side of the design. Rhythm. Rhythm is created through the repetition of loops and curved lines, leading the viewer's eye upward in a measured progression. The coils appear to move gently up and around the verticals, echoing natural growth patterns. So we talked a little bit about that before, how that circular motion gives you the movement in the design, but it moves you through the design, and because of the repetition, there's rhythm in the design as well. Now that I've mentioned about those loops, though, it's not going to aggravate me. I just think they're too big now. Contrast. Effective contrast is achieved through line type, straight versus curved, and texture, smooth versus rough. There's less contrast in colour, which keeps the design subtle but may limit the drama. And that's very true. And that was, I didn't want drama to be in the design. I wanted it to be more about the interpretation of that Stabile defined design style, so that there was movement. Movement was the thing that I wanted to be the hero of the design, rather than anything else in the principles and elements of the design. Dominance. The coiled elements dominate the design, directing attention and creating a focal cluster at the centre top. The focal area could be slightly stronger if the main flower, the Banksia, had more prominence or colour. That's very true, and perhaps rather than colour, as I've said all along, if I had made it a bigger Banksia flower, it would have enhanced the design a little bit more and made it a bit more like the figure, the dancing figure that I had hoped it would be. That's just me. Proportion and scale. All components are in excellent proportion to each other. The scale is appropriate for the base and overall presentation. Nothing feels oversized or lost. So that, well, you see, I think that those loops on the left-hand side, as I look at it, are a little too big. I think they should be a little bit closer. Not the same size as the Strelitzias, but closer to the Strelitzias than they are, because they're just a little bit too wide for me. I just feel like it's out of balance, out of kilter in some way. Unity. A very unified design, despite my opinions. Materials work harmoniously together and the style is coherent. The natural base connects seamlessly with the design above, grounding it beautifully. And that was very fortunate that I had that timber slice that was exactly the right size to be part of the base. Anything bigger would have been too dominant. Anything smaller would have looked like it was overbalancing on the design. So it was good to have that Banksia slice that I could actually fit the tomato cage onto comfortably and then know that the rest of the design would come together. So let's look at the strengths now of this design. It's a clear expression of the Stabile style. So as we have said all along, it's about implied movement, not actual movement. Excellent use of form, line and texture. Effective spatial composition with strong negative spaces. Visually balanced with good rhythm. And that's probably the one that I don't think is as strong as the others. Let's put it that way. So that would be something that I would look at in terms of improving the design. Let's see what the suggestions were from Design Eye. First of all, enhance the focal area. The eye is drawn to the circular elements, but the floral element, if intended to be the focal point, could be more prominent through either stronger colour, form or placement. So this is about the Banksia flower at the top, and what it's saying is that if I wanted that to be the focal area, even if I did this design again as a Stabile design, there's some things I would make a little bit better in it. But if I wanted that top part, so all of the movement leading up to the focal point at the top, then I need it to be a little bit more prominent than it is. So perhaps the Banksia flower is not the right choice, even though it was the right colour for this particular design. Something that was more more obviously circular in its form would work better, and something that was a brighter colour, even a brighter green, would still work. You know, so one of the big chrysanthemums or something else that was green and round, that would work there. I could probably even get away with a sunflower in the ones that have the little bit of the brown or reddy colours in their leaves, not the full size ones, but the sort of mid-size ones, the bread and butter plate, not the dinner plate size, shall we say. Now, suggestion number 2 is slight colour variation. While harmonious, the palette could benefit from a hint of deeper or brighter green, or even a contrasting accent, a red stem or a seed pod to add more depth and interest. So that's another thing that I could think about, having a seed pod at the top. So I could have had the Banksia seed pod in a bigger size. That's a much darker colour. I don't think I'd probably go for the red stem so much. I just think that would be too much out of the colour palette for me. But I think the deeper or the brighter green, perhaps not the deeper green, I'd probably go for a brighter green to give it a bit more colour variation. So another good suggestion. Number 3, base integration. The base is rustic and solid, but additional integration, a small vertical repeat of the coil material touching the base, could link it more cohesively to the structure above. So what it's saying is perhaps another of the, I think probably Strelitzia leaves rather than the green leaves, touching that base to bring it into the design, because the Strelitzia leaves are a similar sort of colouring. And I think as I look at it, what I also wanted to do was I felt when I looked at it after it had been judged, is that I needed to bring the grasses of the skirt down more and curl them up a little bit, so that that base behind it, the frame behind it, wasn't quite as obvious. Final thoughts. This is a highly accomplished and visually interesting Stabile design. It effectively demonstrates structure, sculptural presence, and creative interpretation within the defined style. The work is both imaginative and technically sound, with only minor refinements needed to elevate it further. And that's essentially a very good review, a very good assessment, analysis of the design. I agree with most of it. I think, as you heard, I'm still not convinced about the balance in it, the visual balance in it, with those bigger loops on that side, and that's something that I would look at again. But the benefit of trying out these defined design styles is that you get a feel for plant material. So you get a feel for movement with things that are curled, and you get a feel for using negative space in that as well, and the repetition that gives you the rhythm in the designs. So all of these suggestions, all of these analyses are worthwhile, whatever stage you're at in your floral art journey. So if you would like your own designs analysed, you just go to the website, follow the instructions there, and within about 24 hours, you'll have a report exactly along the same lines as I present in each of these videos that will give you an assessment and an analysis of your design, as well as some suggestions for improvement. All very useful in your education of your floral art journey. I wish you well with that. I'm Stabile and this is Floral Art Review.